Okay, we are back for some Unreal studying here. I'll be joined with Blackheart in just a minute, but until then. Okay, so um, we just finished off the starter guide. Okay, so if you're looking at the getting started with Unreal Engine 4, just to kind of keep track with what we've done and what we're at. We've done the level design quick start and starting out, the artist quick start, and the programming quick start. Um, Not yesterday, but the day before, we were kind of working on what we may need to study in order to build our own. So, so we're probably going to be kind of uh, covering those topics a little bit more in the coming days. So, and then we'll see about, what we want to, what kind of game would we want to make? What game, like, there might, let's, you know, uh, in my particular opinion, I would feel like, Blackheart and I should probably build a game that we might both enjoy playing in our off time. Like, hey, if we're going to be building it, maybe we can have fun with it. Or maybe we can, play it on stream or something like that for you guys. You never know. But I mean, that's something that we'll have to figure out, a little bit. So, but there's Blackheart in the stage, so let me go ahead and invite him to speak. There we go. Hey there, Blackheart. How you doing, David? Oh, I need to first off, I need to stop my music and get my headset audio so everybody can actually hear you. um, okay. I'm doing okay. I'm doing good. So, um, but I tried to look up a little bit in terms of the tutorials, and unfortunately, a lot of it is pretty much YouTube based. Or we may
Yeah.
we may need to just like find a common YouTube video that we may need to kind of look and work with to kind of build our own, which is gonna have its own problems because I mean, um, trying to um, I mean, I don't really. I mean, first off, we're probably going to be needing to pause it and stop it at times to kind of go through, what steps they did in order to get it to work. Second problem with it is the fact that, they may come after us. The person who created said video might go, "Hey, you guys are copying all of my material. No one's gonna watch my video if your guys are, you know, showing it on screen." Um, which, obviously is a bit rough. We don't really want to do that, you know.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, um, there's been a lot of drama lately concerning that, reaction videos.
Yeah.
And we got to be careful with that.
That's
Um,
why I never mess with that.
yeah. Um, I mean, obviously, if we do go over a video, then we're gonna need to make sure that we, copy the the link for said video and, make sure that we put it, state it in our description for that, for our live stream and whatnot for that particular day, which is gonna be a little rough. Um, but because I'm I'm not that great in editing and stuff like that. I'll need to remember that. Um, but to be honest, I didn't really find too much in terms of if we're gonna be making something in 2D, we're probably gonna have a little bit of difficulty trying to go over that, you know, um, because Unreal doesn't really do a good job with it in themselves,
Yeah.
and
All I can find on their documentation was the top-down 2D game setup, 2D tile set, and tile maps.
yeah,
The flip book, which is for 2D animations,
hmm
and that was pretty much it.
yeah. Um, now, uh, I did find one particular link that uh supposedly covers a 2D game development tutorial series. Um, but a lot of it is also the YouTube videos as well. So it's like, uh, it's it's not exactly great. It doesn't necessarily go through its own tutorial. It's basically kind of giving you links to um, you know, um, to other, well, I mean, they do have like additional pages of information, but eventually it gets to a point where they're just gonna cover over, videos that Unreal did. So it's like, so eventually it'll get to that point, um, but I mean, if you want me to, I can send you that link for that.
You can send me the link and I can look at it off stream.
Yeah. But in the meantime, I fear we can at least cover the topics that we kind of went over yesterday. Well, not yesterday, the day before. Of um, we have some topics that we probably should cover if we want to be able to use them in our game, right? Such as like
Right.
audio, um, what was it? Audio, game controls, level transitions, so on and so forth, right?
Mm.
So, um, you know, is there something else that you might have in mind, you know,
Mm.
or would you like to just kind of go with that? I want to know what you're thinking about as well, because obviously, this is a joint effort. I don't want to be,
I know.
I don't want
The audio one would work for whether it be 2D or 3D. The audio one would work for pretty much anything.
to, yeah.
As for the level one, maybe since 2D and 3D are somewhat different on how they manage levels.
Hmm, I guess.
And what was the other thing you said? Was it?
Well, here, let me send you the list of things that, I kind of wrote down here. I'll put them in the Discord. Um, so those are topics that um um I figure we should probably go over because those are um
Yeah,
ones.
which game to make would probably help on deciding, okay, what tools do we try and focus on first?
Yeah,
Which audio would fit for anything.
yeah.
Game controls would kind of depend on what we go for, since each kind of game has like its own set of controls in a way.
Well, I mean, we're still
Like
gonna.
a side scroller would not have the same controls as a top down, for example.
Mm, eh, well, okay. Yes and no. movement could still be, um, movement could still be like the WASD keys,
Yeah, but
but
how they react would not be the same.
well, that's, that doesn't necessarily, we're looking more at the game controls, what we can use to control the character. It doesn't matter what that character does with said controls, that will handle in the game itself. What we're trying to figure out is like, what controls do we take in, and then we can figure out like how those controls are handled by the game. Like if we're doing like a keyboard, for example, and we're like going, okay, like you said, top down, WASD means, you're going north, northeast, west, south, and west, right?
Yeah,
In that kind of fashion, right? Whereas, the space bar might be like, hey, we're just gonna shoot our gun or something like that, right? Whereas in a platformer, then we might be like, okay, well, A and D, you're moving left and right. Up might be a jump, or might be like climbing a ladder. S might be like, hey, you're like moving down like a pipe, or
machine.
moving down or something like that.
Yeah,
Space bar might be a jump. Um, so you might have like a different key for firing your weapon or something like that. Who
yeah,
knows, right?
yeah.
So I mean,
Uh,
so
mm,
obviously the game itself determines how we use those controls, but we need to be able
how to
to
map them.
exactly how do we get those key commands? How do we have the game engine understand when it's pressing those key commands? And how does it interpret those key commands into the game itself? you know how does it transition the W being pressed to what the game wants it to do? So
Yeah, yeah. As for animating characters and objects, that would depend on the what we're doing, if we're doing 3D or 2D, because I think the one on the Unreal would be more catered to the 3D, but if it's 2D, we will have to look at the flipbook and the tile tutorial.
right. Well, I mean, we're still going to want to have a 2D animation. Okay.
Yeah,
Just
which is a flipbook one.
yeah. Um.
And tiles manage collision as well.
Right. Um. But we're still going to need to cover that because I mean, let's face it. What there's very few games where you see no animation whatsoever from the uh, from your particular character. Now, obviously, if you're playing something like a top-down shooter, like R-Type, or Commando,
Well, there
Contra,
have
or
to be,
something like that. There's real. Well, I mean, Contra, there's animation there. Um,
yeah. A
but
lot of top-down games have animations. They just, depending on the developer, how much animation it has is up to them.
well, you know the um, if you're playing something like Galaga or something like that, or R-Type or something like that, you're just flying that spaceship around. There's no like animation in the spaceship itself. You're just moving it left or right, up or down, and that's it. You know, Now you could try to put some animation like, hey, if you're turning to the left, now suddenly the ship kind of angles a little bit to the left, to say like, oh, I'm leaning more to the left, or I'm leaning more to the right. I mean, you could put that in, but that's very minimalistic animation for the most part. But for things like Pac-Man, Contra, Super Mario Brothers, you're gonna have like walking animation, or idle animations kind of thing.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah. But yes, you're right. That that's what they call a flip book, but it's still the same thing. It's still
Yeah.
animation.
With
So
the flipbook, it's just okay. I'm gonna take this set of frames. I'm gonna order them like this to use as an animation.
yeah. So um so yeah,
Yeah.
but
Object collision again for 2D will be the tiles stuff. Well, on 3D, that one will depend, I think,
yeah.
on how Unreal manages 3D objects. Okay.
So now, is there one there that you would like to kind of look at first? Um, my personal um, my personal viewpoint right now is we should probably look at source control at the very beginning. So we can try to see what we can do about setting something up for ourselves for later.
Hmm.
Um, like is there something? Does Unreal allow for source control through GitHub? Is there some other source control that it handles? How do you handle the integration of it? That kind of thing. Um, that's what I'd like to kind of learn a little bit first before we do and go too far. That way we can maybe set something up, but that's my thought line. What about you? What is something that you would like to kind of focus on first?
Let's see. Yeah, my finding about source control would be a good thing.
Okay.
Uh,
Do you want to cover? Do we want to cover that right now?
it was on the. Was there on anything about that on the documentation?
Yep. There's a page for it.
Okay. Mm,
If you go to the get starting, it's on the left-hand side under understanding the
um,
basics.
I'm using the search function up above. Oh, there it is. I hope this is the right one.
Well,
As well
at the very top,
show it on.
there should be like a understanding the basics and source control near the very top of the page.
Yeah, I think I found it. Just give me a second. I'm going to studio mode so I can edit the size of the browser since I don't know if we'll have the Unreal Engine open.
Okay.
Let's see. I'm pretty sure I found it. Before I make it if I make it bigger, I'm gonna put it as it is right now to have a quick look at it.
All right. Here, let me bring up your stream so I see what you're seeing.
Okay, yeah, looks like the engine might be active for this.
Okay. Shall we go through this or?
Sure.
Okay. So the Unreal Editor has built-in support for source control packages. Source control is used to manage changes over time to code and data, which is pretty much essential nowadays. It enables teams to coordinate their game development efforts. Perforce and SVN are supported by default. Okay, so I've heard of SVN. I personally have not heard of Perforce, but that's me. I mean, I know of GitHub um, as a main one. I know of SVN. Um,
Yes, I never heard of either of them. I've only used GitHub.
um, I forget what the what the N stands for in SVN, but it's basically source version. Um, oh gosh, I'm blanking on what the N stands for. Hold on.
Okay.
Um, um, I mean, it's shorthand for subversion, but um, I'm wondering if they had any, if it's, some kind of accurate acronym kind of thing. Um, but it doesn't look like it. I think it's just you know, a simple um, shortening of the word down into their basic, you know, some basic letters. So,
Hmm.
so, you know, maybe you can say, the source for a source, version control or something like that, but it's not necessarily that. So, but I personally have not seen Perforce at all. So I don't know what that's all about. It might be something related directly to Unreal. Um, I'm not sure. Let's see. Um, free version control software. Um, let's see. Uh, yeah, looks like it's just another version control system that I personally haven't heard about. But I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of source control software companies out there already. So, um, you know, um, if you, I'm just looking at, people also search for GitHub, Assembly, Smart Bear Software, Atlassian. It's like, okay, just a bit, in terms of, you know, let's see, source control software. I mean, Git, Preforce, Azure DevOps Server, Apache Subversion, Concurrent Version System, Rational Clear Case. It's just so much that's out there. It's like,
Hmm.
pick one.
Yeah.
um, but more often than not, I hear about people, uh, you know, lately it's been mainly GitHub that's been kind
Yeah,
of the
it's
main,
the most well-known one.
yeah, currently. For a while it used to be, straight SVN, where I used a program called Tortoise SVN to handle source control.
Hmm.
Um, but you know, Perforce, no idea. Haven't used it, so I don't really know.
Yeah, never heard of it.
Alright, so activating source control. You can activate source control in one of two ways. In the level editor's preferences window. So here, I'm gonna go ahead and open up one of the projects so I can kind of see what they're kind of talking about here. So
Hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna do the same.
So level editor's preferences window. What are they talking about by preferences? I mean it's a window, so I don't see preferences in the window drop down, so hmm.
Open any random one.
There's the content browser, which okay. Let's see. Developer tools doesn't have preferences. That's not in there. Maybe editor preferences?
Maybe I no.
I'm not necessarily seeing. Um, I'm not necessarily seeing a location in the editor preferences that shows anything concerning source control outright. So, hmm, I'll have to close that down for right now. Okay, so at least okay, so under the content browser, okay, the middle screen, where you have the save current, modes, content, marketplace up at the very top, there is a source control up at the very top where it says source control is currently disabled for, I have like the programmers program quick start open right at this moment in time.
Yeah.
There is a source control button at the very top. Now, uh, you can connect to a source control, but seeing that we don't actually have one, um, it will, you know, that's not going to necessarily work for us. Um, okay, so
If you keep on reading, it says activating source control via editor preferences. So in the editor preferences, we should be able to activate source control.
okay, well, I'm not necessarily, I wasn't actually seeing it per se, but we can look through this a little bit more. So concerning activating source control via editor preferences. So you can activate source control via the editor preferences window by edit, editor preferences, and loading and saving. Aha.
Yep.
So, so
Let
editor
me double
preferences,
check.
loading and saving. Gotcha. So, where is that? Okay, source control down at the very bottom there. So automatically checkout on asset modification, prompt for checkout, add new files, use global settings, and then tool for diffing text. Well, that doesn't necessarily show where you need to connect to on that, so that's a bit rough. Um, but not sure what we can really do about that there. But let's move on and we'll see. Like maybe they'll tell us how to connect. So
Yeah.
we might need to do it through that content, you know, um, from the content browser itself. So automatically check out an asset modification. When checked, this will automatically check out any asset that has been modified. So um, if you are, changing an asset, if you're changing code or something like that, it will automatically check it out so that people will know that you are making any kind of modifications to it. I mean, I'm assuming that you know about source control, right?
Yeah, a bit, yes.
Okay. Um, so it's just meant so two people don't have, don't check out the same software at the same time. Otherwise, um, you might have some problems with um, like if say you check out the source code and then I check it out afterwards, okay, and then I submit like a simple like if statement, right? Well, that if statement isn't on your version of the software that you checked out. So when you check in your version that might have like say a for loop afterwards, that if statement that I might have made is completely wiped out because it's not in yours. So when you save it, only your version is checked in, so that if statement is gone. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So typically, you want to kind of hold off on checking out anything that someone else has. So typically, you might be able to kind of work through that a little bit. Like if someone checks it in, then you can then you can um, check out that version, to update yours, and then you can check in what you have, so you don't screw up, or you don't have any kind of um, you can see their changes, it modifies into yours, and hopefully, any changes that you might have made, doesn't get absolutely destroyed by what they did.
Yeah.
So, um,
Neither her shy.
but obviously that's very, um, very dangerous, to
Mm-hmm.
check out. So prompt for checkout on package modification. When checked, a prompt will appear when you make changes to a source control package, asking if you would like to check out or lock that package. Okay. So so if there's something that is, you know, has a lot of information in there that you need to modify in some way, then you might want to check out that entire package. So yeah, okay. Add new files when modified. This will add new files to source control when they are modified. Okay. Um, so this, um, if I'm understanding this correctly, normally, for source control, you, whenever you add, like, make any changes, right? There's
Yeah.
always a way for you to kind of roll back to any previous changes that you might have made. And since, you can remove the new changes that you made to go back to a previous save, right? Well, in
Yeah.
order to go about doing that, you in a sense need to save those files individually every single time that you are um, making any changes and making any kind of modifications to it. So if you don't do add new files when modified, then there might not necessarily be any particular rollback. You'd have to be very confident in your submissions that you will never need to roll back anything. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So at least that's what I'm interpreting from this. I don't know if that's exactly correct, but that's what I'm interpreting from what they're stating here. So, do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, it does sound like it is that way.
Okay. If there's something else, or if there's something else that you might be thinking, then please feel free to speak up because I don't want to override
Don't
your
worry.
your mindset. So,
Don't worry.
use global settings. So use global source control login settings rather than per project. So changing this will require you to log in again. So um, not quite sure exactly what this is meant to be all about. Um, I guess in this particular case, instead of having to log in multiple times, like if you're like maybe making like multiple projects for some reason, right? That's it's basically saying, hey, in order to modify any settings in this one project, you're going to have to log into said project. Whereas if you have global settings, then you just kind of need to log in once and you're done. So at least that's how I'm kind of interpreting it. Um, why you would be working on multiple projects at the same time, I don't really know. Um,
Depends on the company.
yeah,
Some companies have that habit on doing multiple projects at once.
yeah, but having a programmer hopping into like multiple different programs at the same time sounds like sounds like they're really pushing the multitasking, and let's face it, multitasking can be very dangerous.
Yeah,
So, and I don't really, some people might be really good at it, but more often than not, I find that it can be very
stress
um,
inducing.
stress-inducing. Find it can cause a lot of problems because you're trying to juggle multiple things at the same time, and you might just kind of drop the ball. So,
Yeah, or
uh,
get things mixed up and bring one thing the wrong project.
I mean that can happen too. So, hey there, Em, how you doing there, bud? Welcome back to the stream. So yeah, it's I my personal preference is focus on one project at a time. Get that project done, and then you can move on to the next project. That's my personal um, mindset about it. Now, that's not to say that, um, like, hey, you get done with the project, you're never going to come back to said project. Okay. You may come back to it again for, like, hey, maybe you want to make a version 2 of it, so you may need
Yeah,
to kind of go back to the said project to update it. Or maybe
yeah,
you
like
need,
Homeworld did.
right. Or maybe you need to fix some bugs in there or something like that, that you didn't necessarily catch the first time. Um, like you might be on your second project, but the first project, someone comes in and says, "Hey, I found the bug. You guys should fix this." And it's like, "Oh, yeah, okay. Where's that bug? Oh, there it is. Done." And send it right back out again, right?
Right.
Or send an update out. Same kind of thing. But you know, concerning those global settings, do we use a global setting where you just kind of log in once and it handles like all the projects, or do we have it like at a per project kind of deal? So
Yeah. In my personal opinion, I'd rather have each project be separate and not doing something like global like that.
okay. Um, yeah, tool for defined text. So specifies the file path to the tool to be used for diffing text files. Okay, interesting. You know what that is all about, right?
Uh,
I can explain if you're
mm,
not, if you don't.
might want to explain it because I think the description I got once before wasn't very reliable.
Okay. So, when you are, um, okay, there's two ways of going about, diffing text. Okay. There's like your, maybe you need to check. Um, uh, maybe someone, you know, maybe you're in a situation where people are grabbing the same file at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they put in a new file that you're gonna need to grab to make sure that they're not overwriting anything that you're gonna need to change yourself, right? So like for
Mm-hmm.
example, you're trying to work on this one function, trying to get it to work the way you want it to work, and suddenly someone adds in a new file that suddenly like wipes out that entire function. What are you gonna do, right? All your work that you've been kind of working on that is completely gone based off of their file, right? Obviously, you would hope that that doesn't actually happen, but I mean, let's face it, if you're allowing for sharing of the same file, that could happen. Um, so you can then do a diff, which is basically taking their source code, putting it on like say the right side of the screen, and you take your source code, the one that you've made, and put it on the left side of the screen, and you call what's called a diff or difference between the two source files, and it basically compares your two to see if there's any kind of changes whatsoever. If you added a space, if you added a new line, if you added some additional code, did you take out code? You know, it basically shows those differences between the two, um, like in either on your side or on their side or on both, kind of showing what is different between the two different source codes. Like, you added in the for loop. Okay, well, they didn't add in that for loop, so that for loop would kind of go there on their particular file, that kind of thing.
All right.
Um, um, and you can kind of do this again with um, like previous versions as well. Like say you wanted to see the difference between the current version of the file and the version prior. Like you want to see what someone else, what your prior, what your other developer did in that change. Like maybe they removed the for loop or something like that, and you want to maybe restore it or something like that. So, or you want to see what they did. So you're like, hey, I'm getting this strange bug all of a sudden. What did this guy do? So you check the current version with the previous version, and you do a diff between those two to see what was removed or added or whatever. So you can kind of see, once again, you see that, what was added, what was taken out, and if it was just space, new line, so on and so forth, right? So
Right.
that's how you use a diffing tool to kind of help yourself out. So um, so do they have a tool pre-built into Unreal? Who knows? But it sounds like they're basically saying, hey, you can specify a path to a tool that you have yourself, so you don't have to worry about that. So,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
okay, so activating source control via the content browser. You can also activate source control in the content browser. Well, I mean, technically you haven't activated anything, from the loading and saving. You haven't specified a source control there. There's no place to put down a website or anything like that in the source control and loading and saving. So technically,
Mm.
there's these are more settings for your source control, but not actually stating where your source control is.
No.
So that's the editor preferences are just preferences. That's it. So But activating source control via the content browser is something that will, is happening. So you can also activate source control in the content browser. To do so, right-click any asset or folder at the bottom of the context menu in the source control section. Click Connect to Source Control. I mean, that's one way of doing that, but I mean, there is a source control at the very top of the, um, you know, there's a literal source control button at the top of the window, at the top of the
Right.
context window. So, um, you know, I'd be very careful with right-clicking any asset or folder because it might only source control that asset or folder, and that's it. So, and that might not be what you need to do. You know, you might need to source control the entire project.
I guess
Maybe.
that would depend on the role for each person.
I mean, true.
Like maybe there's someone in charge of just the NPC, so they would just source control the NPCs.
Right. Um, yeah, so obviously it's dependent, but yeah. Um, but I mean, if you're doing assets and folders and code and stuff like that, then it's like, well, maybe right-clicking isn't necessarily the best to do, but we move on from there.
Yeah.
This will open a login screen where you can select your source control system and enter any appropriate settings and other information. Enter the appropriate information and click Accept Settings. After source control is activated, the display of the assets in the content browser will change to reflect their source control status. And some source control options will be included in the right-click context menu. So obviously this is going to be very helpful because if, say, um, a source file has been modified, has been changed by another developer, then you will typically see that the Unreal Engine or um, your development platform, Visual Studio, will show that hey, you know, it'll kind of show like a little context saying hey, this has been modified, and um, you may need to refresh to make sure that you get the current version. So okay, so status icons. The context browser will display special icons in the upper right-hand corner of assets to give the source control status. Below are the available icons and their meanings. So a red check mark is checked out by you. So you've checked out, one particular source file, and it will be the red check mark. Okay. If it's checked out by another user, you'll see a blue check mark, and you see that there's like a little padlock there, meaning that most likely they have it locked, so you can't check it out yourself, which is typically a good way of going about doing it for the most part. But you know, um, because you don't necessarily want people clobbering other people's code, but you never know, right? Maybe maybe you're really in a rush and everybody needs to kind of work on the same source code for some reason. That's going to be a mess, but I mean, um, you know, you never know. It all depends on the company, right? So,
Right.
um, you have marked for add, which is a red plus mark there. So basically, um, say you created another you created another class. You created another C++ class that will handle additional um, topics that you want to do. Typically, it will show up as a yellow question mark there, as not in the depot. Okay, meaning that there's no version of it in the source control. Okay, so if you're seeing that yellow question mark, that means that there's nothing in the your source control repository holding on to that information. So if say like the power goes out and you never saved it or something like that, then it's gone forever.
Mm.
Okay? So sometimes it's good to add these files to your source control so you won't have that particular problem, right?
Mm.
Um, so so when you see the not on depot, you can you know uh, basically select that file and say, hey, I want to add it, or marked for add. So then you'll see that plus mark there. So when you commit all your changes to the repository, then that file will now be added into the repository. And now everybody else that has access to the repository will see it. Okay? And then, of
Mm-hmm.
course, there's the newer version of the file exists in source control. So if you've seen a yellow check mark, then you'll know that someone has committed a new version to the repository, and you're going to need to kind of refresh your repository to see the changes that were made. Now, you might not necessarily care. Maybe you that's part of the like source code that you're not really working on or anything along those lines, but um, it's good to
It
kind
just
of
simply depends on what part of the project you're in.
right. You still might need to use it, in your project. Like maybe they added like a new function into a class that you are using, and now you can use said function yourself. Like maybe they added an animation to an actor that you are using, and now you're like going, oh, I can use that animation now. Yay! That kind of thing, right?
Mm.
So that kind of thing. And that's okay. So source control actions. While source control is active, the following context menu will be available when you right-click on an asset. Yeah, checkout, refresh, history, diff against depot. So checkout. Checks out locks the asset for editing. This prevents other users from editing the asset at the same time. Um, I There should be a way for you to check out and not have it lock. If you want to do it, I think there's an option for you to go about doing that. You know, um, so um, I think the
I guess
settings.
we'll know more in the next one where it says checking out and checking in.
What's that?
I guess
Maybe,
we'll know more for down below where it says checking out and checking in.
maybe, but I can't doubt it. But more often than not, checking out will lock the file. So, um, that's typically like the default behavior. If you don't want that locking behavior, then obviously you'll have to like maybe change it if you can. I'm not, some programs might not even allow for you to do that, to keep it unlocked. So, uh, I guess it depends. So, refresh refreshes the source control status of an asset. So like, maybe before you commit, you always want to refresh because when you do refresh, it checks the repository to see if there's any newer versions that someone might have committed to the repository. So say, you know, um, they don't show a mark for when something is like already been committed and is perfectly fine. Like there's nothing else going on with it on the status icons, which is kind of weird. You would
Like,
you would think that they would show that, um, but if you do refresh, like typically I think I've seen where they use like a green check mark to kind of say, hey, this has been checked in. There's been no changes to it. Everything's fine with it. You can check it out without any problems, right? Um, so let's say you click that refresh and suddenly that green check mark turns into the yellow exclamation point, meaning someone that's committed right before you did that refresh, or prior, after you checked it before till to now or something like that, kind of thing. So um, so now you see that yellow check mark, and now you're going to need to update you know um, what you have, right? So history gives a revision history of the selected asset, allowing you to see previous edits. You know, uh, what I said prior with seeing previous source versions.
Yeah,
You know, same.
just version history.
Yeah. So that just basically shows you, you know, and obviously you're gonna want to make sure that you have a very detailed description of every time you check in files. Like, if you say something like, I modified code, and that's it, then you're gonna
Well, what code did you modify?
exactly. You're not necessarily, if someone is trying to figure out like what broke in someone's code, they're gonna be like looking at all these descriptions, going, okay, that tells me nothing. But if you
Yeah.
do something like, hey, I modified this particular function to do this, then that might give a little bit more information, right? So documentation. Documentation is very, very necessary when you're doing group projects.
Yep.
So cannot stress that enough. So, and then of course they offer the diff against the depot. So this allows you to check the asset against the version currently stored in the source control depot. So let's say, someone added a newer version into the depot, and now you have to, double check your version versus their version or something like that. You can use that to see. So, or you
Hmm.
can see, what they changed. Like maybe your code is now suddenly breaking because of what they added or something like that. Like maybe they didn't even do any kind of compiling on their end before they uploaded their code, right? So now
Right.
everything's breaking, and now you're having to kind of diff to see what the heck they changed. That's screwing up everything inside of it, or something like that, right? Or maybe one of the assets just kind of flies off into space, at random times, and you're like, wait, this never happened before. What's going on? What changed, right? So you use that to see. Okay. Checking out and checking in. So to check out an asset for editing, simply right-click it and choose Checkout. When checking the asset back in, adhere to the following protocol. Right-click on the asset and choose Check In. A dialog will appear with the required change list description for the check-in. Enter a description which will be added to the asset's revision history. Click OK when finished. So a change list description is required, so the OK button will not be enabled until a description is entered. But let's face it, you want to be descriptive.
Oh yeah.
So, um, all right, moving on. Content hot reloading. We're getting close to the end here, so I'm just gonna kind of power through it if you're okay with that.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. Plus, I'm also it's already 8 for me, so I'll go through it fast.
Okay. Content hot reloading is a new feature that an in-editor source control uses to reload content automatically when the content has been modified by source control operations. Currently, automatic reloading only works when performing source control operations via the in-editor source control integration, and any external changes won't trigger reload. we intend to remove this requirement in a later engine version so that external changes will also trigger hot reloads. Content hot reloading also provides the ability to reload an asset from its last saved state on command. This can be done by right-clicking the asset in the context browser and selecting the reload option under the asset actions group. This can be extremely useful if you have unsaved changes to an asset that you wish to discard in order to revert back to the on-disk version. So this feature currently carries the requirement that you have source control active for your project. No shit. Deactivating source control. You may find that you want to deactivate source control after activating it. Why? I don't really know, but sure. Only use this option if you are absolutely certain that you do not want to use source control. Deactivating source control will put your content out of sync with your source control system and will make it impossible to check in changes. In the upper right hand corner of the level editor window, click on the green double arrow icon. This brings up the source control login screen. Click Run Without Source Control button. The green icon in the level editor window changes to a red circle with a slash to indicate that the source control is not being used. So the only time that I would ever say that this is kind of necessary is if, um, like maybe you've been removed from the company or something like that, and they tell you, hey, you need to remove your source control or something like that. You need to disable your source control. We're going to be changing our password, and you're never going to touch our source control ever again, kind of thing, right? Obviously,
Right.
not something ideal, especially if you're, you know, um, if you've been like, working for that company for who knows how long, and you want to continue working there or something like that. Like, maybe you're that kind of sucks, um, they may say, hey, you're going to have to remove this or something like that. Now, they themselves might, you know, force you out of the source control. Like they might remove all your permissions and stuff like that, and you don't have any access to anything anymore. Um, so even if you were to try to connect to the source control, you might not have any permissions to see
See the
anything.
Roblox?
But yeah, it's one of those things where it's
Yeah.
like, you know,
It could be also, okay, you're not part of this project, we're gonna move you to another one, deactivate the source control of this project,
oh yeah,
and wait to be reassigned.
or something. Yeah, pretty much. So, um, but obviously, not necessarily something that you might use often, or at least I hope not.
Hope not.
um, there might also, or here's another thing. Maybe it's an old project and you don't want to see those files anymore. Like you just want to delete that folder from your hard drive. You don't want to see the folders anymore. You don't want to see, it's taking up too much of your space. You're like, I don't want to deal with it anymore, so I'm just going to delete that entire folder. And, you know, but before you delete it, obviously you want to disconnect from the source control. Otherwise, it might interpret your deleting as deleting the entire folder structure from the source control itself. So
Hmm.
you probably don't really want to have that happen, you know,
No.
especially if you have to like go back to it later on, right? Like, hey, um, like I don't want to see, our first version of this, because we're all done with it. All the bugs that we want to fix are fixed. We just want to kind of delete those files from our hard drive and move on to the next project, right? Yeah, and then you do that, you hit the delete, but suddenly it deletes your everything in the source control, right? And you're like, maybe you're not really even thinking about it. So it deletes everything from the source control, like you move on to your other projects. Then later on you go, hey, what about, doing a second version of this old game that we have? That sounds great. Let's go check it, and you look and suddenly it's all gone. And you're like, oh right, I deleted everything. Oh no, that kind of thing. So,
Or it was lost.
yeah, you would
Or
hope.
what happened to Gearbox with one of Homeworld standalone expansion?
Hmm.
They lost the source code.
Yeah. So, not exactly ideal, but I mean,
Nope.
it, to say that it doesn't happen is, lying. you know,
Well,
so
it can happen.
it can and has happened.
Yep.
So, all right, so that's a brief description of source control. Now I'm looking at the Unreal under the source control um, on the context here. Let me bring up the Unreal Engine here. So under the, if you're looking at the Unreal Engine right at this moment in time, and you're looking at the window, you see the context window. There's a source control button at the very top.
Yep.
Right now it's saying source control is disabled. So if you click on that, you see there's a couple actions. There's check out modified files. There's submit to source control, and which aren't available right at this moment in time. You can't click on either one of those because we don't have a
Nope.
source control right at this moment in time. And there's one for connecting to source control. Now, this brings up a window that I don't know if anybody can actually see or not. Nope.
Let me see if I can show it and just need to edit one of my window captures.
Yeah. But
Yep, there it is. It's visible on mine.
okay. I'm not going to bother showing it. Anybody can really see it, to be honest. So,
Yep.
you see the source control login. You see a provider, which right now it says none, which we don't have a provider right at this moment in time. But if you click on that drop down, you'll see Subversion. You'll see Plastic SCM. You see
Mm-hmm.
Perforce, and you see Git, which is a beta version, which is interesting.
Hmm. Especially
Um,
for how long it's been going on.
yeah, you would think that they would have integrated Git into their source control fairly early with
Yep.
how use
Well,
you know
probably Unreal Engine 5 has the completed version, probably.
probably hard to say,
Yep.
uh, but um, now Subversion it there is no like web page that really stores the when you're using Subversion, there isn't really any kind of web page that it stores the files at. Okay, Subversion kind of keeps the repository pretty much on your hard drive, so it can fill up your hard drive quite a lot
Yeah.
if you're not you know if you're not careful. Um, and in some ways, that can be a good thing because it keeps your files private. So no one can kind of see your code, no one can modify your code, no one can break in. Like for example, for Git, if someone hacks into your account, they could potentially be changing your code. Okay, they can kind of then they can connect to that particular you know, repository, change the code, put in some kind of malicious code in there or something like that, upload it, and now suddenly your Git repository has some kind of virus in it or something like that, right? You
Yep.
know, so it's not perfectly safe. So obviously subversion would be the safest route out of the bunch, but at the same time, you're gonna need your hard drive space in order to handle a subversion repository, right? So, um, plastic SEM and Perforce, no idea. Not sure how they
Don't
handle
know.
the um, repositories, where they store the repositories at. Is it a version of Subversion where they keep the files on your hard drive? Don't know. Is it a version that's very similar to Git where it's on an actual server? Don't know. Again, no idea. But we'll have to kind of look at that a little bit more when we develop, when we start working on our own game. For right now, that's something that we'll have to hold off for now. So,
Yeah.
so, all right, but that's gonna be it. Let's go ahead and close out for now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna update my note saying um, that we kind of covered source control
Yeah.
for now. So
And let's see. What should we tackle tomorrow?
well, I would say let's leave like the UML, for last because I want that kind of fresh in my mind when we start working on our first game. Sound like a plan?
Okay. Yeah.
You okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay. So I'm gonna kind of put that at the end of my list, at the end of my notes, so we kind of cover that for like the last topic. Um, I mean, the which platform and which game to make, we can kind of save that for like
When we start making some.
right before we do the UML, or like right after we do the UML. I would say probably right before. What say you?
Uh, like what platform we're gonna be putting it up will probably be when we decide to actually start making the game.
Right. But I mean, we're probably gonna need to know what uh, we're gonna need to know that information before we really do any kind of formal UML. So, um, so that's why I'm thinking maybe we can figure that out before we study any kind of UML work or UML
Mm,
tutorials or anything like that. Or would you prefer doing that afterwards? I mean, I'm good either way. I'm just saying.
I feel like I'm good either way as well. So I don't know.
I fear, um, you know, doing it before and then covering the UML, we can kind of figure out like, during the UML, like what portions are we really going to be like looking at, kind of thing. Or we might be like while we're doing the tutorial for UML, we might be able to kind of um, like construct our own UML at that time as well. You know,
Hmm.
like if we already know, like, hey, we're building a game of Pac-Man, well, then let's build the UML for it while we're studying it.
Hmm.
Sound like a plan?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So that leaves audio, game controls, animated characters and objects, level transition, AIs, object collision, physics, and blueprints. Um, I would say let's put the ones that probably are gonna be like maybe like the toughest ones that we might have some difficulties dealing with. Like right at the very like let's study that early. Because that might be something that we're gonna be needing to kind of review anyway, right?
Right.
And it might not be something that we're gonna be like using right away either, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say like AI and audio, for example, those are probably going to be kind of more late than early. Or and during the construction of the game, I would imagine that like audio and AIs might be more later on in the game development than early. Do you
Yeah,
agree with
most
that?
likely. Yeah, in early development would most likely be like controls, animation, and collisions.
Okay, so you want to do like game controls, animating characters and objects more later.
Sure.
Um, so, okay, hold on, let me. Okay, so right now, we've covered over source control. I have audio and AI. Do you care which order we do those in, or
Either one is fine.
okay? Right now, I have audio and then AI. I can switch them around, but it probably doesn't really matter all that much. I would say that we're probably gonna want like object collision, like one of the last ones. Um, Animated characters and like in order from earliest to latest. We're probably gonna want to do like game controls are probably gonna be kind of late in our coding for the most part, I would imagine. Um, but object collision and character animation is going to be fairly early in development, right? So I'd say we'll do like game controls first, then say animating character, and then object collision after that in terms of order.
Trying to organize a little bit. So, what was it again on first?
Um, so kind of going a top-down list here. Game controls would be first covered.
Okay.
Animating character would be second, and then object collision would be the last topic covered out of those three. Do you agree with that, or do you want to change things up a little bit?
No, I'm okay with that.
Okay. So we have level transition, physics, and blueprints that are like the last three that we should that I have in that list that I sent you that um, that I'm not quite sure where to kind of put them in. Um, I would imagine physics would be something that we're probably going to want to do fairly early, depending on the type of game we make, right? So I would say maybe put that right before game controls.
Mm, Probably yes, because the character's gonna have some physics that will react to the controls.
Okay. Um, uh, Blueprints, I would say that we should probably study that early because I'm not quite sure what blueprints are all about. I know that, Unreal Engine uses that a lot, so I'm thinking we'll put that like maybe after AIs,
I don't know.
or do you want to cover that later, like after object collision? Like, like super um like have that as one of our last topics that we study.
Hmm. I'd say probably yeah after object collisions.
Okay.
Um, from what I kinda understand, Blueprints kind of streamlines a few things.
From 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 the looks of it, yeah. Again, I barely looked at it for, you know, so I don't really know completely. Blueprints give me kind of like a UML um, vibe to it. Like you can use blueprints to basically be like a UML in a sense. So, um, so we might not even need like a UML. We can probably just kind of get away with doing like a blueprint. But I don't know. That's what I'm not sure about. So
Mm, then I'd say we put it after object collision, probably.
that's fine. I'm okay with that. And what about level transition? I would imagine
Hmm.
that's fairly late because we still want to
That's when
make
we start making like multiple levels.
right. We need to finish our first level.
Yeah,
We need to build our first level before we consider doing anything else, right?
yeah.
So, do we want to cover that like super early? Like, maybe cover that tomorrow, like before audio? Or do we want to cover that late, like after blueprints?
Hmm.
Because I'm pretty sure that we're probably going to need to kind of go back to it anyway.
Yeah. Uh, Probably after blueprint, since we're probably gonna be working with just one level first before we even look at multiple.
After blueprints? Okay,
But who
well,
knows? Maybe blueprints can handle level transition.
maybe. Okay, so I'm gonna send you the list again on Discord, so you have it. So and new list and bam. Okay, so that's what I figure our schedule of everything that we kind of want to do in the next couple of days. Sound like a plan?
Yes,
Okay.
it looks pretty good.
So tomorrow we'll go over audio. The day after we'll cover AIs, then physics, then game controls, and so on and so forth. So,
Mm.
sound like a plan?
Yep.
All right. Then let's go ahead and close on down, my friend, so you can go get yourself, some more food and prep for your game, which, what are you doing today?
I'm gonna continue my Homeworld series by starting Homeworld 2 Remastered.
Okay. And I'm gonna be doing some, video uploads here in just a second, but, that's gonna be it for, this session of
Yep.
Unreal. So, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording now. For anybody that's watching this recording later on YouTube, help us out with the YouTube algorithm, but liking and subscribing. Check out our descriptions. Help us out there. And yeah, stopping recording now.